deserve. Thank you, Mr. President. I yield the floor.
Mr. President,
Senator from Arizona.
I'd like to make remarks about the Farm Bill Conference Agreement that's before us. Of course, across the nation, Americans are demanding that Washington restore their faith in government. Last year, we saw a Congress crippled by government shutdowns and debt-ceiling standoffs. We nearly failed to pass a defense authorization bill. And while many of my colleagues have high hopes this year for returning the practice of moving legislation through the regular order and perhaps working under a more open amendment process, I am profoundly disappointed that one of the first pieces of legislation we'll send to the President this year is a $1.5 trillion farm bill. It's mind-boggling sum of money that's spent on farm subsidies, duplicative nutrition and development assistance programs, and special interest pet projects. Taxpayer groups like the Citizens Against Government Waste blasted this farm bill as, quote, a dung deal. Last week, the Wall Street Journal called it, quote, a bipartisan taxpayer raid, writing, quote, it's no accident that Congress dropped this porker under the cover of the State of the Union hoopla. Handouts to agribusiness and millionaires, continued trade protectionism for the sugar industry, it's all still there, unquote. How are we supposed to restore the American people's confidence with this monstrosity? A few weeks ago, we crammed down their throats a $1.1 trillion omnibus appropriations bill loaded with wasteful spending. Tomorrow, we'll wash the omnibus down with another $1 trillion. The only policy that gets bipartisan traction in Congress is Washington's desire to hand out taxpayer money like it's candy. We've heard about some of the, quote, savings generated by this farm bill. It's true there are noteworthy cuts to several outdated Depression-era farm subsidies like the direct payments program and the counter-cyclical programs. We also closed loopholes in our food stamp programs and conservation programs, which generated about $16 billion in savings, according to the Congressional Budget Office, and I applaud the conferees for their efforts. But unfortunately, just about every subsidy eliminated under the Farm Bill is simply reinvented into a new and many times more expensive program. For example, we have a new thing called Agriculture Risk Coverage Program, which locks in today's record-high crop prices and guarantees farmers up to an 86% return on their crop. Depending on market conditions, this ARC, Agricultural Risk Coverage, could cost taxpayers between $3 billion to $14 billion each year, far more expensive than the $5 billion saved by the elimination of the direct payments program. The bill also maintains the $95 billion federally backed crop insurance program, which subsidizes crop insurance premiums. We then pile on a new $20 billion program called Supplemental Coverage Option that subsidizes crop insurance deductibles. The bill also strips out an amendment offered by my colleagues, Senator Durbin and Senator Coburn, which would have prevented crop insurance subsidies from going to individuals with a gross income greater than $750,000 a year. That amendment was adopted by 59 votes in the Senate's Farm Bill earlier last year. And guess what? Surprise, it's absent from the conference agreement. Millionaire farmers can rejoice that their crop insurance subsidies are safe. That's millionaire farmers, farmers with a gross income greater than $750,000 a year. So the next time I hear the managers of this bill talk about the small farmer, I guess they're talking about millionaires as well. But it's all part of Farm Bill politics. In order to pass a Farm Bill, Congress must find a way to appease every special interest of every commodity association, from asparagus farmers to wheat growers. If you cut somebody's subsidy, you give them a grant. If you kill their grant, then you subsidize their crop insurance. Let's look at several handouts that our special interests have reaped in this year's Farm Bill. The bill provides $7 million in grants for the marketing of sheep. Now, some who may be viewing this at home will find that, maybe think I'm making it up, that we're spending $7 million of their tax dollars for the marketing of sheep. Now, it also adds a thing called, and I'm not sure I pronounce it right, japonica rice. Now, japonica rice is a sushi ingredient grown primarily in California, and it's added to the list of products that can receive farm subsidies. Now, the bill provides $100 million to promote the maple syrup industry. I repeat, $100 million to promote the maple syrup industry. It says the American tax dollars will, and I quote from the bill, promote research and education for maple syrup production, promoting sustainability in the maple syrup industry, and market promotion for maple syrup. So, my fellow citizens, the next time you see an advertisement for maple syrup, you may want to watch it because it's your tax dollars that paid for it. It places a 15-cent fee on harvesting Christmas trees. Not even Christmas is left out of this one. A 15-cent fee on harvesting Christmas trees. That money then is earmarked for promoting the orchard industry. $12 million for a wool research and promotion program. Now, there's a lot of needy areas of America today, but I had no idea that wool research and promotion was worthy of $12 million of our tax dollars. I think this next one is probably my favorite, or unfavorite. $5 million for a study to, quote, again, I'm quoting from the bill, evaluate the impact of allowing schools to offer dried fruits and vegetables to children. Now, I know that that's a tough decision for schools to make as to whether they should offer dried fruits and vegetables to children. Do we need $5 million to help them evaluate that? $25 million for a new grant program to, quote, teach children about gardening, nutrition, cooking, and, get this, and where food comes from. I'm sure all over America, children are asking, where does food come from? This may sound like a well-intentioned initiative, but this grant program is a lot like 18 other food and nutrition programs that the Government Accountability Office declared duplicative in a report issued 2 years ago. The federal government's duplication of nutrition program has cost $62.5 million annually in previous years. So here's a new grant program under the label of nutrition education. The energy title of this bill doles out about $881 million in energy programs. Most Americans don't realize that the Farm Bill has become as much about energy subsidies as farm subsidies. There's funding for ethanol research, biorefinery installations, and a sugar-to-ethanol program where the federal government purchased surplus sugar, sells it at a loss to ethanol producers. American taxpayers will spend $5 million on the, quote, biodiesel fuel education program. Now, if there's anything that's needed in America, it's a good, vigorous biodiesel fuel education program, and we're going to spend $5 million on it. It's to spread the gospel on the benefits of biodiesel. I have no objection to the use of biodiesel. In fact, I think I prefer it much more than the alternative as an alternative compared to corn ethanol. But here we are, $5 million educating consumers on the benefits of biodiesel. Hidden in this bill is a tax on heating oil. Just yesterday, the Washington Times talked about the Farm Bill's National Oil Heat Research Alliance program in an article titled, "Congress Seeks to Jack Up Fees on Home Heating Oil in the Midst of Frigid Winter." The article reads, "Congress's mammoth Farm Bill restores the imposition of an extra fee on home heating oil, hitting consumers in the cold weather states just as utility costs are spiking. The fee, 0.2 of a cent on every gallon sold, was tacked on to the end of the 959-page bill, which is winding its way through Capitol Hill. The fee would last for nearly 20 years and would siphon the money to develop equipment that is cheaper, more efficient and safer, and to encourage consumers to update their equipment. It was backed by the Northeast lawmakers who said it would fund important research to benefit consumers. The bill prohibits oil companies from passing the fees on to consumers, but taxpayer advocates said that's a sham and that the money has to come from consumers. To say they can't pass on the cost, said Diane Katz, research fellow in regulatory policy at the Heritage Foundation, it's kind of silly because, of course, the costs are going to get passed on. Money is fungible. So here we have a special oil tax on consumers where the revenue is earmarked back to the heating oil industry, about $15 million a year, according to the GAO. Why is the federal government in the business of collecting funds for heating oil research on behalf of the heating oil industry? The bill reauthorizes USDA loan subsidies for peanut growers and allows them to use their peanuts as collateral. If a peanut grower forfeits on their USDA loan, the federal government takes ownership of the peanuts and taxpayers bear the cost of storing the peanuts. The infamous sugar program is housed in this farm bill. This is probably the most ongoing scandal in the history of all the farm bills and of all the egregious aspects of it. Like the peanut program, USDA gives sugar growers, primarily in Florida, Louisiana, and Michigan, hundreds of millions of dollars in loans each year. If a sugar grower misses their profit margins, they get to keep the loan and transfer their excess sugar to the federal government as collateral. Over the past year, sugar subsidies and forfeitures have cost the taxpayers $258 million, while over 640,000 tons of sugar was handed over to the USDA. And you know something? If you really look at it, there are a few families that control the sugar industry in Florida. And those families, God bless them, have been generous contributions to both Democrat and Republican parties. So the taxpayers have paid $258 million. Over 640,000 tons of sugar was handed over to the USDA. Combined with import tariffs and marketing controls, the USDA sugar program costs consumers over $3 billion every year. It's one of the most obscene federal farm subsidies ever conceived, and this farm bill, advertised as full of reforms, does nothing. Another bizarre handout in this farm bill that I've been involved in now for many years is the creation of a catfish office. Again, I assure my colleagues, I am not making this up. A catfish office inside the U.S. Department of Agriculture at a cost of $15 million a year. The USDA will hire inspectors to visually inspect catfish in seafood facilities. Only catfish, not a shrimp, not a cod, not a tilapia, but only a catfish. We are going to have a special office called, appropriately, Catfish Office, to inspect visually catfish in seafood facilities and only catfish. Senator Shaheen and I and 11 other senators have sponsored legislation to kill this catfish program. I've been opposing it for years. In 2012, our legislation was adopted in the Senate by voice vote. And I assure the distinguished manager of the bill, that is the last time that on this issue I will accept a voice vote, because the distinguished chairperson assured me that with a voice vote that this amendment of ours would remain in the legislation, and obviously that has not been the case. So the next time that the distinguished manager, whenever it ever comes up again, assures me that an amendment of mine will be adopted in the final legislation, I will have to have better authentication than just taking her word. Last year, the House Agriculture Committee passed a bipartisan amendment to repeal it in the Farm Bill. Despite all this opposition, the unpopular Catfish Office resiliently survived conference. We don't need a new USDA catfish inspection program. The Food and Drug Administration already tests catfish along with all other seafood. But certain Farm Bill conferees are insisting on creating a catfish office because catfish farmers in southern states don't want to compete against foreign catfish importers, particularly those from Vietnam. Its true purpose is trade protectionism at the taxpayer's expense. Under this Farm Bill, there will be a virtual ban on catfish imports for several years, while foreign inspectors switch from FDA's inspection procedures to USDA's catfish procedures. The Government Accountability Office investigated the proposed catfish office, and in four different reports called it duplicative and wasteful, and warned that it fragments our food safety system by splitting FDA's responsibility to inspect seafood. In fact, one Government Accountability Office report simply titled, quote, "Responsibility for inspecting catfish should not be assigned to USDA," and it called on Congress to eliminate the Catfish Office. Both the U.S. Department of Agriculture and the FDA have questioned the scientific value of the proposed catfish. Several years ago, USDA studied the idea and concluded there is substantial uncertainty regarding the actual effectiveness of a USDA catfish inspection program. Even the President's budget proposed to zero it out. American consumers should also be concerned about the trade implications of this program. Some nations, including Vietnam, have threatened WTO retaliation against American agriculture exports, like beef and soybeans. Trade experts warn that this catfish gimmick is the kind of protectionism that harms our efforts to win concessions under trade agreement negotiations like the Trans-Pacific Partnership, which could reduce the tariffs on American products sold to Asian trading partners. Again, Senator Shaheen and I tried to eliminate the Catfish Office in the Senate's Farm Bill, but the managers blocked a vote on our amendment. The House Agricultural Committee did the right thing and passed the Farm Bill amendment to eliminate it. Unfortunately, when this bill went to conference, several Senate conferees blocked a vote in conference to repeal it, actually blocked a vote in conference, and actually rewrote the law to increase it. It seems that catfish is one bottom feeder with friends in high places. At the end of the day, this Farm Bill will be hailed by its supporters as reform-minded. Let me assure the American public that this is hardly reform. It was managed under a closed amendment process and will prove to be more wasteful and costly than any Farm Bill we have ever seen. For these reasons, I urge my colleagues to join me in opposing this bill. And, Mr. President, I ask unanimous consent to have included in the record at this time the Wall Street Journal editorial appropriately entitled, "A Bipartisan Tax Raid."
Without objection, so ordered.
Mr. President, I yield the floor.
Mr. President.
Senator from Michigan.
Thank you, Mr. President. First of all, I want to thank our Majority Leader, again, as I did earlier today, for his help in bringing this conference report to the Senate as quickly as possible and for his willingness every step of the way to work with us. And I want to thank my partner in the Senate, Senator Cochran, from Mississippi for his wonderful leadership. And I'm going to, at this point in time, I think, turn to him and allow him to make his statement before proceeding with mine. But I just want to say to Senator Cochran and to all those in Mississippi who are lucky to have him as their senator fighting for him, what a pleasure it has been to partner with him and his really excellent staff, and to have the opportunity to come here today with a strong bipartisan product that represents the agricultural and food interests of all parts of our country. And at this point, I would yield to the distinguished senator from Mississippi.
Mr. President.
Senator from Mississippi.
Mr. President, I'm honored to be invited by the distinguished chairman to proceed in describing our work product, the Farm Bill Conference Report. It's been a true pleasure working with her and the members of her staff. It seems like over a long period of time, with her coming to my state of Mississippi and traveling to other regions of the country to get a first-hand impression and a lot of knowledge about the challenges being faced by the agriculture sector in our country. She has brought to this effort a lot of enthusiasm and common sense intelligence and just pure old hard work and personal courtesies that abound to all of us who serve on the Agriculture Committee in the Senate during hearings preparing for the markup of an agriculture bill, during conference with our colleagues in the House to produce a conference report. I'm pleased that this conference report is represents a 5-year farm bill. It's very important to production agriculture and to all Americans, as a matter of fact. The leadership that we've had from other senators on the committee are reflected here too. We've had an active committee participating in hearings as well as our markup session. It's been a pleasure to work with Senator Stabenow and all of our fellow colleagues on the committee. We're recommending reforms in this legislation that are designed to assure producers that we understand the value of a safety net that will support them when they're struck by disasters or other things that are out of their control. Marketing disasters are just as severe as weather-related disasters. The risk management policies in the bill recognize the regional differences in priorities of agriculture production throughout the country. The commodity and crop insurance titles of the conference report reflect how Congress can work effectively to support American agriculture and at the same time be responsible to taxpayers. The conference agreement consolidates and improves programs to encourage farmers and ranchers to use healthy land and forest management practices to conserve land, water, and wildlife resources. Programs like the Wildlife Habitat Incentives Program, which will become a part of the Environmental Quality Incentives Program, and the Wetlands Reserve Program are very important elements of a new emphasis on conservation. We also achieve savings that are significant from reforms in the nutrition title of the Farm Bill. The expected costs of nutrition programs are reduced by $8 billion. The conference report includes programs to combat waste, fraud, and abuse. I'm particularly proud of our work to address the needs of our nation's food banks, because whether it's in Jackson, Mississippi, or Indianapolis, Indiana, many people turn to these facilities when other options are not available. Other titles of this legislation, such as the research title, have proven that keeping the United States lead in agricultural research is essential to our maintaining an edge in global competition. Our land-grant universities, such as Mississippi State University and Alcorn State University in my state, have seen their university-based research commercialized to improve American agriculture production. In addition to agriculture program reforms, this conference agreement contributes to the goal of deficit reduction. The Congressional Budget Office estimates the bill will save taxpayers nearly $17 billion. The Farm Bill baseline was trimmed by $6 billion from sequestration, resulting in an overall savings of $23 billion. Mr. President, failure to enact this Farm Bill would leave farmers and related businesses with uncertainties that have been hanging over the agriculture sector for the last 2 years. This bill achieves significant savings and addresses a variety of agriculture needs across the country. I urge the Senate to support passage of the conference report.
Mr. President.
Senator from Michigan.
Thank you, Mr. President. Again, let me say what a pleasure it's been working with distinguished senator from Mississippi and also the chairman in the House, Congressman Lucas, and the ranking member, Congressman Peterson. This really has been an example of the House and Senate working together in a bipartisan way. We are about to take the final steps now in passing the 2014 Farm Bill. We have actually, as you know, passed this twice in the United States Senate. Each time we've gotten large bipartisan majorities because of the fact that we've worked together. The final conference report that we have before us is one that I believe that we can all be proud of. I hope my colleagues will support it and send it to the President for his signature. Now, we all know this has been a long time in coming. In fact, frankly, way too long. Our farmers and ranchers have waited way too long. This bill has been a long and winding road, but in the process we have worked together. We have not quit. We've worked across the aisle. The final bill has a support of over 370 different groups, and they represent those from all over the country and all over the ideological spectrum. And that's because we wrote this bill when we were working hard to find common ground. We listened to each other, we respected each other, and we developed a bill that works for every kind of agricultural production in every region of our country and for families and consumers across the country. We have 16 million people who work in America because of agriculture. 16 million people. Many of them work in Michigan. Many of them work in Mississippi. They work in California, in New England, Virginia, in North Dakota, and every other state in this great country. They grow different crops in different climates, and they have different needs. And that certainly is one of the challenges always for a farm bill, particularly when we're talking about a farm bill that reforms programs. Those 16 million people are on our minds every single minute as we wrote this bill. And that's why we have such a strong coalition supporting this farm bill. This is a farm bill for the future with a whole new focus on responsible risk management, healthy, locally grown foods, strong conservation practices, clean energy, research. In fact, it's a bit of a misnomer to call it a farm bill, really. It's really 12 different bills, all of them impressive and worthy of colleagues' votes, and they all are put together in what we call the Farm Bill. So I want to take a moment to talk about these different pieces and all of the great policies that we have been working on for 2.5 years. The first title, the commodity title. Now, if you were going to split off the commodity title of the Farm Bill and give it a name of its own, you would probably call it the Farm Bill. That is what pretty well describes the commodity title. And maybe that's why, even though the commodity title of the Farm Bill is in fact smaller in terms of spending this year than it has been before, the Farm Bill has held onto its name all these years. Once upon a time, the commodity title was the be-all and end-all. The first Farm Bill was written during the Great Depression, when the entire agricultural system in the country broke down. Farmers left food to rot in the fields, because crop prices were so low. It would bankrupt them to spend the money to harvest and to ship their products to market. And at the same time, people were so desperate for food that for some, we have some of the most iconic images of the Depression that are long, crowded bread lines that stretched for blocks and blocks. We've come a long way from the Depression, and our agricultural policies today are very different than they once were. And that's why this Farm Bill focuses on the future of agriculture in this country. This is not your father's Farm Bill. In 1996, Congress passed a law called Freedom to Farm that eliminated the last vestiges of those production controls. And to give farmers time to get used to the new system, that bill created a system of direct payment subsidies, which were supposed to be temporary. Well, it didn't quite work out that way. Those payments continued, Farm Bill after Farm Bill, even when it was quite clear they were no longer defensible. The checks kept coming, and in good years and bad. In some cases, the checks went to people who weren't even farming. In today's budget climate, we just cannot afford those business-as-usual policies of the past. So it's been one of my top goals as we wrote this bill to end direct payments once and for all. And that's exactly what we have done together in this Farm Bill. We also went through this bill page by page and made major reforms. We streamlined programs. We've cut red tape. We've eliminated waste. And the first thing in this bill, page 1, line 1, is repealing direct payments. This is not your father's Farm Bill. This is a critical step in changing the paradigm of agricultural policy. Instead of direct payment subsidies, we are shifting the focus of the Farm Bill to responsible risk management. You know, farming is a risky business. In fact, I can't think of a more risky business than farming in this country. We saw this in South Dakota last fall when a freak blizzard wiped out tens of thousands of cattle and devastated ranchers. We saw this the year before when record-setting droughts wiped out crops across America's heartland. We saw it in Michigan where the combination of an early thaw and a late freeze almost destroyed our entire cherry crop and our apple crop. No other industry is so dependent on the whims of Mother Nature or the wild swings of markets as agriculture. That's why we have a Farm Bill. We have a stake, and we should be proud that we have the safest, most affordable food supply in the world because we partner with farmers. But that's why risk management is our #1 goal in this bill. And it's in fact what farmers have been asking for. They want the ability and, more importantly, the responsibility of managing their own risk. Of course, in a country as big and diverse as ours, the risks faced by farmers in Michigan are very different from the risks faced by farmers in Mississippi or Oklahoma or Minnesota. And that is a key principle that guided us when we wrote the bill to make sure it worked for all different kinds of crops throughout the country. As farmers are managing their risk, we're giving them the choice to participate in an agricultural risk coverage program that we're calling ARC, which will help them cover losses they incur at the individual farm level or county level. Or they can participate in a price loss coverage program, which will trigger if prices drop below a reference price. Both of these programs will use historic base acres decoupled from production to minimize any influence from the program on farmers' decisions on what or where to plant. We don't want them planting to the government program. In addition, in order to qualify for either of these programs, farmers must agree to comply with conservation and wetlands requirements. So important. We are reforming the system to stop subsidy payments to millionaires. And we've imposed a new overall cap, first-time overall cap, of $125,000 for the first time, covering both crop support and marketing loans, all parts of the commodity title. This is the overall commodity title cap passed by the Senate, even though underneath the cap there were differences. We are requesting the USDA to close what's called the management loophole by updating its definition of management and giving the Secretary for the first time the authority to put limits on the numbers of managers on a farm who can qualify for payments. By ending direct payments once and for all, by asking farmers to take responsibility for managing their own risk, and by partnering with them so that they can do it, and by capping farm payments and stopping payments to millionaires, we are putting in place the most significant reforms in agricultural policy in decades. This is a bill our colleagues can be proud to vote for. Mr. President, I think in hearing some of the opposition, folks are debating the old farm bills, not understanding what we have done here. Every farmer we've talked to in writing this bill said that crop insurance was their top priority. So we strengthened crop insurance and gave more crops access to this kind of insurance. With this bill, we are taking significant steps to change the paradigm of farm programs. With crop insurance, farmers don't get a check. They get a bill. They may pay tens of thousands of dollars in premiums and never get a check in a year because it's a good year and there's no disaster, just like any other kind of insurance. This bill also includes a very important permanent livestock disaster assistance program for ranchers who lose livestock due to a severe weather, disease, or other acts of nature. In the past, Congress had to pass ad hoc disaster assistance for livestock producers, adding to the cost and the complexity of the program. These have been some very tough years for ranchers. In fact, livestock herds are down to their lowest level since 1951. Imagine that, because of what we've seen. That's why this bill, for the first time, has a permanent funding baseline and a system that will ensure our ranchers don't go bankrupt because of a freak blizzard in October or a scorching drought that wipes out a rancher's feed supply. This disaster assistance is applied retroactively to October 1, 2011, and makes the program permanent. One of the worst agricultural disasters happened in 2009 to our American dairy farmers. That's why we worked very hard in this bill to strengthen the dairy safety net by replacing the existing dairy supports with two new programs. The Dairy Margin Insurance Program, another insurance program, protects producer margins equal to the difference between the all-milk price and a national feed cost. We're taking special care to make sure that these insurance premiums are affordable for small and medium-sized dairy farms, making sure especially that we focus on any farm with fewer than 200 cows. The Dairy Product Purchase Program, which is new and as a part of this, gives the Department of Agriculture the flexibility to purchase dairy products, milk, other products, when margins fall below $4, and those dairy products will be donated for the first time to families in need through public and private organizations, including food banks, homeless shelters, soup kitchens. This was a hard-fought compromise on dairy. And, Mr. President, I have to say that my preference would have been what we passed twice in the Senate as a strong dairy policy. But given the resistance of the Speaker and the leadership in the House and the need to be able to find something that we could move forward on and pass that would work for dairy farmers, we worked very, very hard to find a way to move forward, to get the votes and support, and make sure that we were helping farm operations in every region of the country. We know that the pressures on New England dairy farmers are very different from the pressures on our own producers in Michigan or in the Midwest or on the West Coast. and we have worked hard to find something that works. While Title I of the Farm Bill reforms programs so farmers are taking responsibility for their own risk, Title II of the Farm Bill is about risk management for the whole country. This is the conservation bill in this Farm Bill. And in all the discussions of the Farm Bill, it too often gets overlooked. In fact, it is our nation's largest and most enduring investment in conservation on private lands, which are the majority of our lands in America. This Farm Bill includes a historic agreement between supporters of traditional commodities and environmental and conservation groups to link conservation compliance to crop insurance. Critically important as we eliminate direct payments and ask farmers to manage their risks through crop insurance. We do not want to create unintended consequences of risk for our land and our water resources. At the start of this Farm Bill process, commodity groups, conservation groups were on very different sides on this issue. But they sat down together, they listened, and they found common ground. And it turned out their differences weren't as great as they thought they were. In fact, Mr. President, no one has a bigger stake in protecting our land and our water than our farmers. With a little compromise and a lot of hard work, which is the story of this entire bill, they brought us a plan that conserves soil and water resources for generations to come and protects the safety net for farmers to rely on. This has been called the greatest advancement in conservation in 3 decades. I want to underscore for my colleagues, this is an important and historic agreement, and thank everyone who has been involved in the hard work of putting it together. We've also created a new sod saver provision to prevent farmers from plowing up native prairie lands, saving money for taxpayers and saving absolutely critical wildlife habitat. We need to manage land to prevent erosion. That's how we avoid having another Dust Bowl during droughts. It's equally important to continue preserving wetlands that help prevent flooding and create important wildlife habitats for ducks and birds, other waterfowl. What else does the conservation title do? Well, it directly preserves millions of acres of wildlife habitat, which in turn has helped rebuild populations of duck, quail, pheasants, among others. That's why the bill has the strong support of Ducks Unlimited, Quail Forever, Pheasants Forever, the Audubon Society, and the World Wildlife Fund, who are only a handful of the more than 250 conservation groups who have endorsed this bill. To strengthen conservation, we went through every program and focused on making it more flexible, easier to use, and we were able to take 23 different programs, cut it down to 13, and put it into 4 different areas with a lot of flexibility that also allowed us to save dollars in this bill. The first is working lands, giving farmers the tools they need to be the best steward of their natural resources. The centerpiece of this function is called EQIP, the Environmental Quality Incentives Program, one of the most important conservation programs out there for farmers. EQIP gives technical and financial assistance to farmers, ranchers, and private forest owners to help them conserve soil and water. Working lands conservation also includes the Conservation Stewardship Program, which encourages higher levels of conservation and the adoption of new conservation technologies. We continued the Conservation Innovation Grants and the Voluntary Public Access and Habitat Incentive Program, which allows landowners to get value-added benefits from their land by opening them up to hunting and fishing and bird watching. We made these programs even more flexible and added a focus on wildlife habitats, making them easier for farmers to use. The second area, Conservation Reserve Program, removes highly erodible land from production to benefit soil and water quality, as well as wildlife habitats. Despite record droughts over the last few years, droughts that in many ways were worse than in the Dust Bowl, the soil stayed on the ground. We haven't had a Dust Bowl. The soil has stayed on the ground. CRP was a big part of that, protecting not only the soil, but air quality as well. We also continue an important incentive program to help older farmers transition their land to beginning farmers. One of the parts of the conservation title that I'm most proud of is a new focus on regional partnerships that will make a big impact on my own Great Lakes that we in the Great Lakes love so much, the Chesapeake Bay and other critical areas where there are large-scale regional conservation challenges. We consolidated several programs into one that will offer competitive, merit-based grants to regional partnerships made up of conservation groups, universities, farmers, ranchers, other private landowners to support improved soil health, water quality and quantity, and habitat for wildlife. The final area includes conservation easements, which lets landowners voluntarily enter into agreements to preserve wetlands and farmland and protect them against development and sprawl. We consolidated and streamlined existing easement programs to protect important land for generations to come. But farmland is also an export bill, Mr. President. In fact, agriculture is one of the few areas where our nation maintains a healthy trade surplus. That's why this farm bill continues efforts to expand opportunities for American exports, including the Market Access Program, to promote U.S. agricultural products in overseas markets and develop programs to open new markets for American agricultural products. The Farm Bill is also a humanitarian bill that speaks to the best about us and our American values. Across the world, millions of people get their only meals as a result of the generosity of the American people through the Food for Peace and the McGovern-Dole program. I saw this last year firsthand in Haiti, where schools would open up bags stamped with the American flag and provide a modest meal to students every day, very likely their own meal that day. I met one little boy who saved part of his lunch to take it home in a bag to his parents so they could have something to eat that night. In fact, in the lifetime of this program, more than 3 billion people in over 150 countries have gotten a meal thanks to the generosity of the American people and the American farmer. The Farm Bill makes major reforms to our food aid programs, speeding up emergency food aid response and giving flexibility to organizations on the ground to supply local food to people in need. And these reforms mean that because of this Farm Bill, we will feed another 500,000 people around the world. That's why this bill has earned the endorsements of many humanitarian and religious groups, including Feed the Children, the One Campaign, Care USA, Church World Service, Catholic Relief Services, Presbyterian Church USA, the United Methodist Church, and the American Jewish World Service, among many, many others. Of course, we know that hunger and poverty strike families all around the globe, including right here at home. And I believe in the richest country in the world, it is a disgrace for any child to go to bed hungry at night or go to school hungry in the morning. Crop insurance is disaster assistance for farmers who have been hit by a natural disaster. The nutrition title of the Farm Bill is disaster assistance for families who have been hit by an economic disaster. Most families who need food assistance only need it for a few months. And the vast majority of people receiving food help are children, the elderly, the disabled, including our disabled veterans. When the House of Representatives passed their nutrition bill, they included many provisions that would have seriously hurt Americans. like many in Michigan who have paid taxes all their lives, lost their job because of no fault of their own, and are mortified that they need help to put food on the table for their families while they're getting back on their feet. This conference report rejects every single one of those harmful provisions. Instead, this final conference report before us today strengthens the integrity and accountability of the Supplemental Nutrition Assistance Program, or SNAP, ensuring that every dollar is spent responsibly so that those who need help can get it. The bill stops lottery winners from being able to get SNAP benefits and stops the use of SNAP funds at liquor stores. It also includes an important provision that addresses what the Washington Post called, quote, a black eye on the program. We have streamlined eligibility requirements to cut down on wasteful duplication, but a number of states discovered a way to use that streamlining to give some families additional SNAP benefits by counting utility bills they do not have. By sending out as little as $1 in home heating assistance, states have been able to qualify families for a utility deduction even if they do not pay any utility bills. Now, I salute those who want to help people get additional funds. I would have very much supported adding additional help in this bill. But this, Mr. President, cannot be justified, what is being done here. We addressed this loophole and protected the entire program for 47 million people. And here's what we've done, and here's what it means to someone on SNAP. If you receive $20 or more a year in low-income heating assistance, if you receive $20 a year in low-income heating assistance, nothing changes for you. If you receive less than $20 a year, you will need to go back to the old system of producing an actual utility bill in order to receive credit for a utility bill. That is the sum total of where we have received and garnered the savings in this bill as it relates to closing loopholes. This is about strengthening the integrity of this program to ensure that food assistance is there for families who have fallen on hard times. This Farm Bill also includes a number of pilot programs to help people find work or receive job training so they don't need food assistance. The Secretary of Agriculture can approve these pilots, which include funding for child care and transportation, to make sure individuals are able to succeed. The bill increases funding for food banks, continues an important effort that provides supplemental food for seniors, as well as the Senior Farmers Market Program. I'm pleased this bill has the support of the AARP and others who understand the importance of senior nutrition. The Farm Bill continues efforts to serve fresh fruits and vegetables snacks in schools and includes a new national pilot based on something we do in Michigan called Double Up Bucks. It essentially doubles the SNAP benefits for families when they shop for fresh produce at farmers markets. I also want to mention the Healthy Food Financing Initiative, which addresses the very serious problem of lack of access to grocery stores in low-income neighborhoods. We have many places in Michigan where this is a very serious issue. This financing initiative will help families put healthy food on the table while creating jobs in neighborhoods across the country. It's also important, Mr. President, to stress that the Congressional Budget Office projects that this Farm Bill, in addition to addressing fraud and misuse, that this Farm Bill will spend $11.5 billion less on food assistance the right way, by the economy improving and people going back to work. And so when we look at the fact that the numbers are going down, it's because of the economy improving, and frankly, Mr. President, that's where we need to be focusing our efforts, is on supporting businesses to create jobs And part of the way to do that is by passing this jobs bill called the Farm Bill. The Farm Bill is also a credit bill, increasing access to resources that help farmers, especially beginning farmers and veteran farmers, own and operate farms. This results in jobs. This title will make more qualified farmers of all sizes eligible for USDA farm loans and gives more flexibility to the USDA so they can better reach new types of farming, including local and regional producers. With 16 million people working in agriculture across the country, the Farm Bill, as I've said, is a jobs bill. And nowhere is that more evident than in America's rural communities. The Rural Development title of the Farm Bill authorizes programs that are absolutely essential to small towns, rural communities, and those who work in those communities. We're continuing the important work of rural economic development and rural broadband. Just as rural electrification brought opportunity to families across the country in the last century, rural broadband opens doors for increased commerce and interconnectedness for the 21st century. 90% of community water systems serve 10,000 people or less. 90% of community water systems serve 10,000 people or less. We provide mandatory funding to address the backlog of rural water applications at USDA, so rural communities have a safe supply of drinking water. And for the first time, we prioritize and reserve funding for rural development applications submitted by communities working together on long-term sustainable community and economic development plans. Because these regional strategies will be more effective at the local level, and we want to provide as much flexibility as possible. This Farm Bill's Rural Development title is about entrepreneurship, and it's the lasting strength of small towns across America that it invests in. As I mentioned earlier today, we're creating an innovative new foundation for food and agricultural research in this bill, modeled after what we do with medical research. And this is to tackle the difficult fight against pests and diseases, and it increases opportunities through innovation to create jobs. For too many years, agricultural research has suffered because of budget cuts over and over again. This new research foundation will bring together public and private funds to maintain a steady stream of funding for this important research. We provide $200 million in seed money, and it can be matched by $200 million from the private sector in an ongoing commitment. In addition to the new research foundation, we have a major new focus on food and agricultural research throughout this bill. We have a major focus on specialty crops research initiative to find solutions to pests and diseases that affect fruit and vegetable crops. And we have efforts in this title to support beginning farmers and ranchers as well. We are also continuing successful research and extension efforts, including work done by our premier land-grant universities like my alma mater, Michigan State University. Forestry title. Healthy forests mean clean air, fresh water, wildlife habitats, and recreational opportunities. Coupled with the tools that we have in the conservation title, the forestry title of the Farm Bill helps foresters maintain the health of our private forest lands. We are strengthening our efforts to fight invasive pests that have destroyed many thousands of trees, particularly in the West. And we worked hard to ensure that private landowners can continue to effectively manage their operations. As I mentioned earlier this afternoon, the Farm Bill is an energy bill. I'm extremely pleased that during negotiations with the House, we kept the full funding from the Senate's energy title. Our rural communities have been at the forefront of the effort to achieve American energy independence. We are strengthening these efforts through the highly successful Rural Energy in America program, REAP, which helps farmers and rural small business owners generate their own power or improve energy efficiency to lower their utility bills. Thousands of farms across the country have lowered their input costs thanks to the REAP program. We're continuing our commitment to the development of the next generation of advanced biofuels. Scientific advancements are allowing us to develop ethanol with food and agricultural waste products. With this Farm Bill, we will see even more biorefineries come online, producing homegrown fuels that bring competition and lower prices for consumers at the pump. This Farm Bill supports our growing bio-based economy with my new Grow It Here, Make It Here initiative also. Bio-based products are manufactured items made from all kinds of plant materials that replace petroleum and other chemicals. These products are everywhere, from the cups in the Senate cafeteria, which are made by a Michigan company, by the way, to cleaning products, industrial lubricants, and even the foam in the seats of your car, Mr. President, which are likely today, if it's a new vehicle in an American-made car, to be based on soy oil foam rather than petroleum oil. Bio-based manufacturing creates jobs, strengthens our economy, and reduces our use of fossil fuels. As I've said before, this is a Farm Bill focused on the future. And nowhere is that more evident than in the specialty crop title. This is essentially the produce aisle of the Farm Bill. Specialty crops include fruits, vegetables, nuts, and nursery crops. We're strengthening the specialty crop block grant program, expanding specialty crop research, expanding crop insurance to include specialty crops, and continuing the highly successful fresh fruits and vegetable snack program in our schools. We don't just want to grow more fruits and vegetables. We need to be able to get them to consumers. That's why this Farm Bill more than quadruples support for farmers markets. We're also strengthening local food hubs, which bring farmers together with local supermarkets and restaurants and schools to supply locally grown healthy foods. The Farm Bill also recognizes an incredibly fast-growing segment of agriculture, organics. We continue our efforts to support farmers to get certified as organic, expand crop insurance options to organic farmers, and provide funding for continued organic research. This bill reflects the diversity of crops, truly, that we grow in America. And nowhere is that more evident than in the specialty crop and organic title. In every part of this Farm Bill, we worked on streamlining and consolidating programs. In fact, we ended over 100 different programs and authorizations in this process. I said to my staff at the very, very beginning of all of this, don't think about programs, think about principles. What should we be doing in agriculture and food policy, not what programs do we want to protect. And that's how we have moved forward throughout this entire process. Mr. President, there is one thing we did add, though, and I'm very pleased with that, and that is a new Veterans Agriculture Liaison at USDA to work with our men and women in uniform who are coming home and want to get involved in agriculture. We know the majority of our men and women are coming home to small towns, like where I grew up in northern Michigan, rural communities, and we want to support them so that they can be successful if they choose to go into agriculture. This is a new kind of Farm Bill designed to meet new challenges of a changing world. We are also making major reforms eliminating unnecessary and justified programs to cut government spending, and to increase the integrity of farm programs. This Farm Bill reflects critical steps, as I indicated earlier, in changing the paradigm where we are ending subsidies and giving farmers the tools to manage their own risks. We support them in doing that. But in doing that, as we know, when we have insurance products, and that's what we're looking at throughout this bill, whether it's a new insurance type approach for cotton or for dairy or for our traditional commodities, with any other kind of insurance, as we know, you pay the premium, pay the premium, pay the premium, but you don't get any help unless there's a loss, a disaster. That is a fundamental shift in this Farm Bill. Managing risk, helping our farmers to do that in a fiscally responsible way. And after all of this work, and I think my distinguished ranking member would admit it was a lot of work. After all of this work, Mr. President, we offer the Senate the only, to my knowledge, effort where a group of people within their jurisdiction of authority have voluntarily cut spending to reduce the deficit. If you couple together the sequestration cuts of approximately $6 billion and the cuts in this bill to agriculture, we are coming to you and offering a bill of reform, of cutting programs, cutting duplication, cutting spending that actually creates $23 billion in deficit reduction. I'm proud of that. This truly is not your father's Farm Bill. We are about to vote to bring debate on this conference report to a close. But before we do, I want to once again thank my ranking member, the senior senator from Mississippi, who's been a friend and a partner throughout this entire process. I've enjoyed very much having the opportunity to work with Senator Cochran and his very competent staff. I learned along the way that we have a great love of music and piano playing and the blues, which sometimes we were singing during this process, I think. But it has been my great honor to work with him and to our House colleagues as we have worked to bring this forward. My ranking member had a different perspective than I had, and we have written this bill together. I've learned a lot about the perspective of Mississippi in the South, and I hope I have shared the perspective of Michigan and the North and the East and the West as we have listened to our colleagues. I would urge our colleagues to support this conference report.
All time has expired. The clerk will report the motion to invoke cloture.
Cloture motion. We, the undersigned senators, in accordance with the provisions of Rule 22 of the Standing Rules of the Senate, hereby move to bring to a close